My wife, Laura, and I have been together for 29 years, married for 26 of those. I'm a 51-year-old man, she's a 49-year-old woman, and we have two grown kids, a 24-year-old son, Joe, and a 22-year-old daughter, Emily. We met in college, dated, fell in love, got married, and built what I thought was a wonderful life together. We did a lot together, communicated constantly, and tackled any issues that came up. We both had successful careers and supported each other in them. Our love life was great, maybe not as frequent as when we were younger, but just as passionate. She's a software engineer, and I own a small landscaping company with 75 employees, which I started after graduation. Since COVID, she's been working from home a lot, and we've talked about me stepping back from the day-to-day operations and her going part-time so we could spend more time together and travel, especially now that the kids are established. Looking back, there were none of the red flags I've read so much about. No strange texting habits, no guarding her phone, no changes in her wardrobe, no unusual behavior, no nights out with colleagues from work. She'd go out, usually with friends or family, and the next day someone would always tell me I should have joined. But I liked her having her own time, and I enjoyed my solitude in my workshop. She was always home early, so to say I was caught off guard is putting it mildly. D-Day was the previous week. I'd planned a surprise weekend at a friend's romantic B&B for our anniversary. It was the winter festival weekend. I left work early to surprise her, telling her to pack for a trip. As I pulled into the driveway, I spotted an unfamiliar car. Immediately, I had a gut feeling something was wrong. I didn't know why, but I did. I sat there, hoping I was wrong. But my gut said otherwise. I sat there contemplating my next move. Should I leave and confront her later? Pretend I didn't see anything? I was shaking so much I could barely see. When I face uncomfortable tasks at work, I tell myself to man up and get it over with. Suddenly, my shaking stopped, and I felt oddly calm. I had no idea how, because inside, I was a wreck. I quietly entered through the back door, and my black lab, Buddy, was lying there looking sad, as if he knew something was off, instead of his usual excited greeting. Gosh, I adore that dog. He stayed put as I tiptoed up the stairs. As I reached the top, the sounds from our bedroom became clear. I approached the door, swung it open, and there he was, her boss, Mark, on top of my wife. I paused for a moment before shouting, "Surprise!" The ensuing chaos would be comical if it weren't so heart-wrenching. He rolled off, attempting to escape the bed, but ended up entangled in the sheets. My wife was repeatedly shrieking, "Oh my God!" while trying to cover herself, but she couldn't because he was still tangled up. Eventually, he freed himself and started searching for his clothes, which were on the other side of the bed. It struck me that they were in the same spot where mine usually landed. For some reason, I beat him to them and snatched them up. My wife was sobbing, repeating, "I'm so sorry." I backed up to the door and stood there while he was standing next to the bed, naked. I grabbed the large armchair from the corner, dragged it to the door and sat down. He asked for his clothes, but I refused and tossed him my wife's robe hanging on the door. He started to approach me. Now, even at 51, I'm in good shape. 6 feet 3 inches, 240 pounds, years of gym workouts and landscaping work have kept me fit. I gazed at him and warned, "If you come any closer, it won't end well for either of us. You'll end up in the hospital and I'll land in jail, so how about you just take a seat?" My wife was now weeping into the pillow, and he sat down. After an awkward silence, he asked, "What's next?" I responded, "I honestly don't know." My wife's crying had subsided a bit, and she sat up. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and declared, "You're both going to spill everything while I record it." They exchanged glances, and my wife queried, "What do you mean by everything?" I retorted, "Exactly that, everything. How it began, how long it's been going on, when, where, hotel stays, dinners, the works, everything." My wife insisted this was the only time, to which I shouted, "Bull crap! There's no way you'd be comfortable enough to bring him into our bed if this wasn't a long-standing affair. If you lie to me again, I'm walking out that door and seeking a divorce attorney." She broke down, crying again. So, for the next 10 to 15 minutes, the truth poured out. It had been happening for over 9 months. It began with him flirting with her and so on until he invited her to lunch, and she accepted. A few drinks later, they were in a hotel. She came home to me that night as if nothing had happened. She insisted it meant nothing, but that didn't make it hurt any less. Once more, I cry foul. If it was tearing you apart, you wouldn't have continued it so effortlessly. They even attended a week-long work conference that I used to accompany her to. She informed me that company policy had changed and spouses were no longer allowed. I pocket my phone, and the room falls silent again. Then, an idea strikes me. I rummage through his clothes for his phone and request his passcode. Surprisingly, he provides it, so I start browsing through his phone. I discover some photos of a woman I presume is his wife and inquire about her name. Carol. She's quite attractive, though not as stunning as my Laura. I inform him as I find more pictures of children. Turns out he has 3. Finally, I find a family portrait of all of them. I hold up the phone and remark, "A lovely family. Why would you risk it all for a fling with my wife?" His response, "What do you mean risk it all?" Me, "You genuinely believe Carol won't find out?" Him, "How would she find out?" Me, "I'm about to call her right this moment." He stands up and protests, "No, you can't." My wife shrieks, "Please don't do this to him." I snapped, "Don't do this to him? You've shattered me, our family, our friends, our future, and my heart, and you're concerned about his well-being." I'm trembling again, trying to hide my tears, but I can't keep it together any longer. I slumped back into the chair and started weeping. She attempts to approach me, but I glare at her and command, "Keep your distance." After a bit, I regain my composure and glance at his phone again. He pleads once more, "Please, I'm begging you. I promise I'll tell her." "Sure you will," I retort. He stands there begging me not to as I locate her number and decide if a FaceTime call would be even more impactful. She picks up, looking puzzled, and asks, "Who are you? Is my husband all right?" He's fine for now, but that's about to change. I switch the camera to show him standing there in my wife's robe. "I believe you're familiar with this man. The room he's in is my bedroom. The floral robe he's sporting belongs to this woman." As I swivel the phone to capture my wife, who's attempting to hide under the sheets, but it's too late. That's my wife, and I arrived home early today to find them in bed together. I genuinely feel sorry for her and terrible about how I broke the news. She begins to sob, and he tries the, "Honey, I'm so sorry, I can explain. It was just one time" spiel. I advise her not to trust a single word he says. It's been happening for over 9 months, and I've spent the last 15 minutes recording all the details they were willing to divulge. I assure her I'll text her my contact info, and she should send me her email address so I can forward her the video. I hand him his phone and overhear her warning him that a packed bag will be waiting outside when he gets home, and if he tries to enter the house, she'll call the cops. Before she hangs up, I throw his clothes at him, and he exits once he's dressed. Now it's just me and my wife left. She gazes at me and starts shedding tears, apologizing profusely. She never intended to cause me pain. Could I find it in my heart to forgive her? It was meaningless, all the typical cheater's excuses. I stare at her and instruct her to pack her things and get out of my house. I head downstairs and pour myself a drink. I'm sitting on the sofa when she descends the stairs. She begins to approach me, and I command, "Just stop." She inquires if we can discuss this, and I respond, "Perhaps. Just perhaps, but not now." I inform her it's going to be incredibly difficult to resist seeking a divorce attorney, and she starts weeping again. She looks at me, and I can tell an "I love you" is on the tip of her tongue. I interject, "Don't you dare utter those words right now because I don't think I'll ever trust them again." More tears flow as she turns and exits the door. Seeing her in tears, walking out the door, my entire world leaving, I crumble and collapse on the floor, shaking and crying uncontrollably. I can't tell how much time passed, but eventually I manage to sit up, still shedding tears, and I dial my best friend. I attempt to speak, but the tears start flowing again, and I can't get the words out. He asks what's wrong, but I can't respond. He asks if I'm at home, and I manage to grunt a yes. He assures me he's on his way. Half an hour later, he's in my living room. I'm still in tears. I hand him my phone with the video on display, and he starts to watch. I can't stand to hear it and go to fix us both a drink. He enters the kitchen, takes my drink away, and pours them both down the sink, saying, "You don't need this right now. You need to talk." "I'm trying, sweetie," I reply, my voice cracking. "It's just a lot to take in right now." Dan and Terry sit down with us, offering their support. The four of us spend the rest of the evening talking in hushed tones, trying to make sense of the shattered pieces of our lives. Terry brings us all some tea, and we sit in a circle, the warmth of the cups providing some small comfort. My phone buzzes again. It's Laura. I hesitate but decide to answer this time. Her voice is shaky and filled with regret. "I know I've destroyed everything," she says. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know how sorry I am." "I'm not ready to talk about forgiveness," I respond. "Right now, I'm just trying to keep myself together and support our kids. We need to figure out the next steps, but it won't be tonight." Laura agrees to give me space and says she'll stay with our son for the time being. I hang up and feel a small sense of relief, knowing I won't have to face her in person tonight. Dan suggests we all get some sleep, but I know rest will be elusive. My daughter, still in shock, decides to stay at Dan and Terry's too. They set up a guest room for her, and Dan offers me the spare bed in his office. I reluctantly accept, knowing I can't face an empty house tonight. Before heading to bed, I step outside with Buddy, my loyal black lab. He nuzzles my hand, sensing my distress. We walk around the yard, and for a brief moment, the cool night air calms my racing thoughts. Back inside, I find Dan waiting for me. "We'll get through this, John," he says, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone." I nod, grateful for his friendship. As I lie down in the unfamiliar bed, I replay the day's events in my mind, wondering how everything fell apart so quickly. Sleep finally comes, but it's restless and filled with dreams of betrayal and loss. The next morning, the sunlight streaming through the window feels too bright, too cheerful for the heaviness in my heart. I join Dan and Terry in the kitchen, where they're making breakfast. My daughter appears, her eyes puffy from crying but determined. "Dad, we need to talk about what's next," she says, her voice steady. "I know this is hard, but we have to figure out how to move forward." She's right. As painful as it is, we need to start planning our future without Laura. We sit down and discuss practical matters: where Laura will stay, how we'll handle the news with extended family and friends, and what steps we need to take legally. Throughout it all, Dan and Terry are a constant source of support, offering advice and a listening ear. Their presence makes the unbearable slightly more manageable. Later that day, I return home with my daughter. The house feels different, almost foreign, as if the betrayal has tainted every corner. We gather Laura's belongings and pack them away, trying to erase her presence. In the midst of this, my son arrives. He looks as devastated as I feel, but he hugs me tightly. "We're in this together, Dad," he says. "We'll figure it out." We spend the rest of the day talking, crying, and trying to find some semblance of normalcy. The pain is still raw, but having my children by my side gives me strength. As evening falls, I realize that while our family has been shattered, the bonds we share are still strong. We'll heal, slowly but surely, and find a way to move forward. For now, that's enough to keep me going. She assures me she'll handle everything, and that I need to focus on taking care of myself and my family right now. I feel a sense of relief knowing that someone is in my corner, someone who understands the legal intricacies of what lies ahead. On the drive back to the cabin, I reflect on the whirlwind of emotions and decisions I've had to navigate. The betrayal, the anger, the sorrow, they all swirl inside me, but there's also a strange sense of determination. I'm starting to see a path forward, though it's still hazy and uncertain. When I get back to the cabin, Cooper greets me with his usual enthusiasm, and I feel a bit of normalcy in his unwavering loyalty. I sit down by the fireplace, watching the flames dance, and let my mind wander. The next morning, I wake up early and decide to take a longer hike with Cooper. The fresh air and physical exertion help clear my mind. As we walk, I think about my kids and how they're handling all this. I know I need to be strong for them, to show them that we can get through this together. After the hike, I make a hearty breakfast and eat it slowly, savoring the moment of peace. My phone buzzes again, but this time it's my son, checking in. We talk for a while, and I reassure him that I'm doing okay. He tells me that Laura has been staying with him and that Chev JTM's a mess. I can't muster much sympathy, but I do appreciate that HevGTM is trying to keep the lines of communication open. Later that day, I decide to start writing in a journal. I've never been one for keeping a diary, but I feel like I need to get my thoughts out, to process everything that's happened. I write about the day I found out, about my feelings of betrayal and loss, and about my hopes for the future. It's cathartic, and by the time I put the pen down, I feel a bit lighter. Over the next few days, I settle into a routine at the cabin. I chop wood, take long walks, and spend time reflecting on what I want my life to look like moving forward. I think about my marriage, about whether there are JTMs anything left to salvage, and what it would take to rebuild the trust that's been shattered. On Thursday, I head back to town for my appointments. First, I see the doctor for an STD check. It's a humiliating experience, but necessary. Then I meet with the divorce lawyer. She's thorough and compassionate, laying out my options and explaining the steps we'll need to take. By the end of the meeting, I feel more informed and somewhat more in control. I return to the cabin, feeling exhausted, but also a bit more hopeful. I spend the evening by the fire, thinking about the future. I know it's going to be a long road, but I also know I'm not alone. I have my kids, my friends, and now, a solid legal plan. The next morning, I pack up the truck and head back home. As I pull into the driveway, I take a deep breath. This is the beginning of a new chapter, and while it's not the one I envisioned, it's the one I have to navigate now. Inside, the house feels different, but I'm ready to face it. I'm ready to rebuild, to find a new normal, and to start healing. It won't be easy, but with the support of my loved ones and the determination I found within myself, I know I'll get through this. I move some essentials back to the cabin, planning to split my time between the two places until I can figure out a more permanent arrangement. The weekend is spent in relative quiet. I find myself contemplating the 29 years we shared and wondering if there's anything worth salvaging. Despite the betrayal, the memories of raising our children, building a life together, and the countless moments of joy keep resurfacing. It's a painful tug-of-war between the past and the present. On Monday, I go back to the office and throw myself into work. My employees are understanding and give me the space I need while making sure things run smoothly. The distraction helps, but it doesn't erase the constant ache in my heart. I meet with my therapist again on Wednesday. We discuss the steps I'm taking and the emotions I'm struggling with. She reassures me that feeling conflicted is normal and that taking time to make the right decision is crucial. We explore ways to cope with the overwhelming sadness and anger. At home, Laura tries to engage me in conversation, but I keep it brief. I know we need to talk, but I'm not ready to face the depth of our issues. She apologizes repeatedly, but the words feel empty now. I can't shake the image of her with her boss, and it colors every interaction we have. Friday night, my daughter Darlene comes over with her fiancé, Tim. They bring dinner and insist we have a family meal. It's awkward at first, but gradually, the familiar rhythm of family life returns. We avoid the elephant in the room and focus on lighter topics. It's a small comfort, a reminder that life goes on. The following week, I make arrangements to see a divorce attorney again. I need to know my options, understand the financial implications, and prepare for the worst-case scenario. The attorney is thorough and explains everything in detail. I leave the office feeling more informed, but still heavy-hearted. At home, Laura asks if we can go to couples counseling. She's desperate to save our marriage, and part of me wants to try, if only for the sake of our history together. I agree to attend a session, but with the understanding that I'm not making any promises. Our first counseling session is tense. The therapist is kind but firm, guiding us through the initial steps of opening up. Laura talks about her regrets, her confusion, and how she let herself get involved in the affair. I listen, but my trust is shattered, and it's hard to see past the hurt. Over the next few weeks, we continue counseling. Some sessions are productive, while others leave me feeling drained and hopeless. I alternate between the cabin and our home, still unable to fully commit to either place. My kids check in regularly, offering their support and reminding me that I have people who care. One evening, after a particularly tough session, Laura and I sit in silence in the living room. She finally breaks down, confessing how much she misses our life together and how she's willing to do anything to make things right. I see the sincerity in her eyes, but I also know that words alone aren't VJTMT enough. VJJ Laura, VJKJ, I say, my voice steady but filled with emotion. VDJNJ, I don't know if we can ever go back to what we had. The trust is broken, and I don't know if it can be rebuilt. But for the sake of our family, I'm willing to try one step at a time. Just know that it's going to take a lot of work. And even then, there are no guarantees. JK. She nods, tears streaming down her face. VJNJ, I understand, Mike. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want us to have a chance. JJKJ. We continue our sessions, slowly addressing the layers of hurt and betrayal. It's a long and painful process, and there are days when I want to give up. But with the support of my friends, family, and therapist, I find the strength to keep going. As the months pass, I start to see small glimmers of hope. Laura's actions begin to match her words, and I see genuine effort on her part to rebuild what we lost. It's not perfect, and some days are harder than others, but for the first time in a long while, I feel a faint spark of optimism. Through it all, I've learned that healing isn't linear. It's a winding path filled with setbacks and small victories. Whether our marriage survives or not, I know that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, and that I have the resilience to face whatever comes next. And so, I continue to take it one day at a time, finding solace in the support of those around me and the inner strength I've discovered within myself. Whatever the future holds, I'm ready to face it head on. I grab my things and head to the cabin once again, needing the solitude to process everything. The drive is long and my mind is a whirlwind of emotions, but the peacefulness of the cabin provides a small comfort. I spend the day chopping wood, taking long walks, and trying to clear my mind. The physical exertion helps, but the pain and anger are still there, simmering just below the surface. In the evening, I sit by the fire with Cooper, my loyal black lab, and think about the next steps. The following morning, I decide to make a list of what I need to discuss with Laura. I know we need to have a serious conversation about our future and whether there's any possibility of reconciliation. The betrayal has left a deep scar, and I'm not sure if it's something we can move past, but I owe it to myself and to our shared history to try and find out. I return home in the afternoon, feeling a bit more grounded. Laura is waiting for me, looking exhausted and remorseful. We sit down in the living room, and I begin to go through my list. Laura, I start, I need to know if you understand the full extent of the damage this affair has caused. It's not just about the betrayal, but about the trust that has been completely shattered. She nods, tears welling up in her eyes. I do, Mike. I know I've hurt you and our family in ways I can never fully make up for, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to try and rebuild what we've lost. Actions speak louder than words, I reply. If we're going to have any chance at fixing this, you need to be transparent with me, with our kids and with our families. No more secrets. She agrees, and we start discussing the steps we need to take. We decide to continue couples counseling and to have regular check-ins to talk about our progress. I also make it clear that I need her to cut all contact with her boss and to find a new job if necessary. The next few weeks are incredibly difficult. There are days when I feel like giving up, when the weight of the betrayal feels too heavy to bear. But there are also moments of hope, when Laura's sincerity and efforts to make amends start to shine through. We have another family meeting, this time with our kids. Laura confesses everything to them, and it's heartbreaking to see the pain and confusion on their faces. But it's a necessary step, and we all agree to support each other through this difficult time. As time goes on, I start to see small changes in Laura. She's more attentive, more present, and more committed to our relationship than she has been in years. It's not a perfect process, and there are still days when the hurt feels overwhelming, but we take it one step at a time. One evening, after a particularly good counseling session, we sit on the porch and watch the sunset. It's a small moment, but it feels significant. For the first time since D-Day, I feel a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we can find a way through this together. Months pass, and while the pain of the betrayal never fully goes away, it starts to fade. We continue to work on our relationship, rebuilding the trust that was broken. It's a long road, but with the support of our friends, family, and each other, we slowly start to heal. In the end, I realized that while the betrayal was devastating, it also forced us to confront the issues that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. It brought us closer in a way I never expected, and while I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, it taught me the importance of honesty, communication, and unconditional support. So here we are, still together, still fighting, and still hoping for a better future. It's not perfect, and it never will be, but it's our journey, and we're walking it side by side, and for now, that's enough.